What happens when you cross one of Nintendo's most obscure game worlds with Athenasos' Desaimon engine? You get BSX Shooting, a game which took years to recover as a ROM. Was it worth all the effort and money poured into it? Let's find out in this review, or not find out. Behold, the laziest video editing in this entire series. I didn't even mute the music! Anyway, for anyone who's not familiar with Desaimon, it is a shmup engine created by Athena, and it was released on, among other platforms, the Super Famicom. With that in mind, seeing official Nintendo characters in this Athena thing, and it's hard to tell who even developed this. The credits are just garbled mess. But ownership issues aside, it's interesting to see a Super Famicom Desaimon engine game being preserved. Desaimon games on later platforms such as PlayStation and Sega Saturn have huge communities dedicated to archiving fan-made content for them. But Super Famicom? That's just me. Anyway, on some notes of the game itself. As you can see right here, it is short. Very, very short. In fact, the whole gameplay will be in this video. In spite of its length, though, it's interesting simply because of all the quirkiness it has. The art assets from BSX are reused in this to create a game that really feels like it was ripped from the 90s. Your player character is Satellaview, one of the BSX characters, the one everyone confuses for a television, in fact. And I'm presuming he somehow got sick of the world and wanted to end it all, so he decided to blow everyone up by throwing ADA memory packs at them. That's probably not what the actual plot is, but that's what happens when I don't have any Soundlink radio to go on. But anyway, the gameplay is typical Desaimon. There is no drastic engine modifications or anything. It literally looks like something someone could have made in Desaimon by themselves, which is probably the point. After all, Desaimon for Super Famicom was fairly recent at the time, and they were probably using this as a salad. On that note, there are supposedly 2 more Desaimon games for Satellaview, but I'll have to get to that in another video, because I haven't ROM dumped them yet. One thing of note about this is that after Stage 2, it stops pulling any punches, and it gets pretty brutally difficult. Not in the bullet hell sense or anything, but you can see me choking at times. Speaking of bullet hells, this game inspired me to go searching around the internet for other Desaimon Super Famicom engine games, since there really isn't a united community dedicated to archiving those. Among some of the things I found in my search are a Toho demo, a game full of 2chan memes, and a homage to Paris Dakar Rally Special, all of which are pretty brutally difficult. Though, of course I'd say that, I suck at shmups. Maybe someone who's played a bunch of Desaimon games before would probably find this easier. But for me, Stage 3 and Stage 4 coming up ahead were real roadblocks. And that's in spite of how generous the game is with power-ups. I mean, in fact, yeah, this game actually, pours power-ups on you. It actually might make this a bit more accessible than other shmups. Nah, it doesn't really. It's still really brutally difficult. And this is one game where it's really obvious the difficulty is masking its length. If you can go through the game without dying and using continues, you can probably clear it in less than 10 minutes. A fact which I am heavily abusing to go lazy on the video editing in this video. Oh, and there's this boss. This boss is definitely a highlight of the game. It's an edit of a Dio Gale Desaimon boss with a photorealistic face on it, and it's pretty difficult. Well, more difficult than I made it look there. Took me hours of figuring that out. Anyway, as you can tell, the game doesn't take itself very seriously. For example, this stage says it's a time attack stage. It's a completely linear path. You can't change the time you go in it. And it's quite obvious that was the joke. Being a fan of really horrible jokes myself, I suppose that makes it no wonder I'm so interested in Satellaview's horrible jokes. But on a more serious note, one of my biggest disappointments with BSX shooting is that there's no custom music whatsoever, even though the Daimon is perfectly capable of that. All the music featured is stock Daimon and Dio music, and I would bet the Dio music puts a lot of weird ownership issues into the production of this. I suppose that would be better than making really bad sounding custom music though. That all being said, I didn't really think to do a pros and cons section for this video, because in this case, it's the Daimon. And your taste in the Daimon engine games would probably be your biggest influence in regard to whether or not you'd want to play this. If you're not familiar with the Daimon games and you want a review to check out, Googling. There's a Daimon Plus review by Luminous, which should do the trick. Daimon Plus is the PlayStation version of the Daimon, and it's pretty similar to the Super Famicom one, besides changes that are probably already mentioned in the video. Although, taking that review in mind, BSX shooting is just the game. There is no editor content in it whatsoever. If you want to edit BSX shooting into something else, well, that's where you get ROM hackers to help. Luigi Blood helped me convert BSX shooting into a save RAM file for Super Famicom Daimon, which makes it editable. So if sometime in the future you see a BSX shooting 2, that was probably me. Anyway, I'm not gonna bother with a numerical score this time, because screw Metacritic. It's not like you're gonna find this game in retail anyway. Shoutouts to Chronomoogle for getting this ROM dumped. Also to Ikari for, the same reason. Speaking of ROM dumping, maybe I should try helping do that with a certain PT. Anyone remember when Konami used to make shmups?